Welcome back to The Explainer. For Lesson 9, I am absolutely thrilled to get into today's material because we are going to be looking at the human mind in a completely different way. I want you to think of your brain as a brilliant, highly evolved operating system. It's packed with millions of years of just incredible evolutionary code, all designed to keep you alive. But, like any complex piece of software, this biological hardware has processing gaps. It has blind spots. And today, we're going to explore exactly what happens when those gaps are discovered and exploited.
I want you to really ask yourself, how sure are you of your own independent thoughts? Seriously, when you make a decision, or feel a sudden thrill, or hold a deeply rooted conviction, are you the one driving? Or has someone, or maybe something, hacked into your system? Well, by the end of this explainer, you might just view your own mind very, very differently. We're going to do a quick diagnostic scan of the mind today. We'll start with our ancient hardware, move through chemistry and glitches, define the cult structure, look at reward system hijacks, algorithms and control, and finally, hit the civilizational threshold.
Okay, let's dive into this. Section 1, the mind's ancient hardware, evolutionary reflexes, and data processing.
So, to understand how our minds can be hacked or manipulated by outside forces, we first have to understand the fundamental limitations of our own ancient biological hardware. Take the dark, for example. Humans lack a tapetum lucidum. That's that reflective layer in the eyes that gives nocturnal predators their excellent night vision. Because we're at a massive sensory disadvantage, our amygdala just goes on high alert in low light. It triggers hypervigilance and something called pareidolia. Basically, that's a pattern-seeking glitch where we literally see faces or threats in random shadows. Your brain prioritizes safety over accuracy. It would much rather you see a monster in a coat rack than miss a real, actual predator. Sure, it's pretty embarrassing when you turn on the lights, but it's a built-in survival hack, and it shows how easily our perception of reality can be distorted by raw fear. And speaking of processing reality, check out this staggering number. 11 million. That is the number of bits of information per second your subconscious system, your intuition, is handling. It's this massive pattern-matching engine running in the background. But your conscious mind, it only processes about 40 to 50 bits per second. That creates a massive, massive processing gap. We are largely running on high-speed, subconscious biological reflexes. And that makes us incredibly susceptible to shortcuts and biases.
Which brings us to Section 2, chemistry, belief, and glitches. The neurochemical levers and rendering errors.
Now that we've seen the processing gaps in our hardware, let's marvel at the software for a second. These are the neurochemical levers and rendering errors that make our internal systems so wonderfully, but also dangerously, malleable. Have you ever gotten literal goosebumps from a soaring piece of music? There's a word for that, frisson. It's essentially a psychophysiological skin orgasm, and it happens because there's a massive neural bridge connecting your auditory cortex to your prefrontal cortex. When music hits you with an acoustic surprise, like say a sudden key change, it triggers an ancient startle reflex. But when your brain immediately realizes it's just beautiful sound, it converts that adrenaline into a massive dopamine spike. Pure euphoria. And it's triggered entirely by just manipulating sound waves. And it's not just music, right? Even love is an algorithm. Look at these 3 stages. Lust is driven by basic hormones. But step 2, attraction, that crazy honeymoon phase, is a total cocktail of surging dopamine and plummeting serotonin. That low serotonin literally causes the obsessive thinking patterns of a new romance. Honestly, it explains a lot of questionable teenage poetry. And finally, oxytocin locks in that long-term attachment. Our deepest, most profound behaviors and obsessions are completely driven by these neurochemical reward systems. And this brilliantly illustrates what we call the psychosomatic bridge, the placebo versus the nocebo effect. Sheer optimism and trust can trigger your brain's internal pharmacy to release endorphins and actually, measurably improve your health. Conversely, pessimism and anxiety release cortisol, creating genuine physical pain. Your expectation and your belief literally alter your physiological reality. The mind doesn't just casually perceive the world, it actively renders it. But because our brain is constantly rendering reality on the fly, it's highly prone to errors. Let's rapid fire through these. Déjà vu? That's a temporary temporal lobe glitch, a millisecond delay making a brand new event feel like a memory. The Mandela effect proves our collective memories can just be flat out wrong, filled in by confabulation. Lucid dreaming shows our brain can boot up a full biological virtual reality while we sleep. And near-death experiences challenge whether consciousness is just local neurochemistry, or potentially something more. The ultimate takeaway here is that our internal sensory archives are highly malleable. They are constantly seeking patterns. Okay, section 3, defining the cult structure, exploiting the vulnerabilities of the human OS. So the crucial point is this. If our hardware relies on fear-based reflexes, and our processing is mostly subconscious, and our neurochemistry can be easily manipulated, what happens when someone weaponizes that? When we talk about cult psychology, we are not evaluating theology, religion, or specific political ideologies. We are looking at pure structural manipulation. A cult uses a high-pressure social environment to bypass your individual critical thinking in favor of total group allegiance. It is a systematic exploit of the exact biological blind spots we just talked about. Psychologists map this manipulation using something called the bite model. Look at these 4 pillars. They control behavior, literally regulating your physical reality like your sleep and diet to keep you exhausted. They control information by completely withholding outside data. They control thought using loaded, repetitive language to shut down any critical analysis. And crucially, they control emotion using guilt and fear. Remember that amygdala hijack from our nyctophobia discussion? They are triggering those exact same ancient survival reflexes to keep you right in line. Let's move to section 4, hijacking the reward system, weaponizing dopamine and cognitive dissonance. Because honestly, fear isn't quite enough to build total allegiance. To truly hack the mind, high-control groups have to weaponize our neurochemistry. They don't just use the stick. They hijack the exact same dopamine cycles we see in romantic love and musical frisson. It usually starts with a process called love bombing. During the initial recruitment, a group will flood a target with intense validation, affection, and attention. It perfectly mirrors the chemical obsession of the attraction phase of romantic love that we looked at earlier. It creates this artificial, dopamine-rich honeymoon phase that completely bypasses your individual critical thinking. You feel like you've finally found your ultimate tribe. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the clear diagnostic difference between a healthy community and a high-control group. In a healthy group, leadership is accountable, criticism is actively encouraged, and you are 100% free to leave. But in a high-control group, leadership is unquestionable, and leaving means total social ostracization. So why do people stay when this becomes obvious? Well, it's cognitive dissonance. When the group fails them or abuses them, leaving means admitting their entire identity was built on a lie. To avoid that intense psychological pain, members will actually double down and increase their commitment. Section 5. Algorithms and collective control, the decentralization of cult dynamics. Here is where this gets incredibly urgent for all of us. We tend to think of cults as, isolated compounds out in the middle of the woods. But in the digital age, these dynamics have evolved. The danger is no longer isolated. It has been completely decentralized. In fact, it's probably right in your pocket. I want you to think about your own social media feeds for a second. Algorithmic echo chambers. These are systems using information control and emotional triggers to isolate populations into highly polarized groups. Sound familiar? It is quite literally a digital automation of the B model. Algorithms curate your information, use loaded language, and trigger outrage and fear to keep you engaged. They are hacking your emotional hardware. And the result of these algorithmic echo chambers is this stark, honestly terrifying concept: collective cognitive lock. This is a decentralized form of mind control, where a mass population suffers a total loss of individual critical thinking. We become biologically addicted to the validation of our own polarized echo chambers, entirely cut off from any outside data. Finally, Section 6, the civilizational threshold, navigating Type 1 transitions. Let's move to the macro level and see how this builds. We aren't just talking about individual psychology anymore, right? We are talking about the long-term survival of our entire species. As we advance as a civilization, potentially moving toward a Type 1 status where we fully master our biology, from engineered soundscapes that trigger frisson on command all the way to direct human-machine interfaces, we face a very delicate balance. On one side, we have social cohesion, maintaining our individual critical thought while cooperating on these grand engineering goals. But on the other side, collective stagnation, descending into polarized algorithmic hive minds where our psychological sovereignty is completely stripped away. So as we continue to merge with our digital environments, and as algorithms get better and better at exploiting our biological code, what will happen to us? Will we actively protect our critical thinking and our individual identity? Or will we simply allow our biological hardware to be hacked, absorbed, and lost into the collective? Keep your eyes open, question your certainties, and I'll see you next time.